Chapter 3, Section 1, we're going to be talking about describing matter. And as you can see, our main question here by the end of this time is we must be able to answer this question: what properties describe matter? So if we go to the next page, page 89, we first have to figure out what matter is. And if you look at the definition of matter, we see that matter is anything that has mass or takes up space. We've kind of touched on this before when we talked about the difference between having mass and weight. Mass being the amount of matter that makes up something, and weight being how much gravity pulls on that matter. So if I have a stapler, the amount of mass that makes that up, the amount of matter, the things that make up that stapler is always going to remain the same. If I take it to the moon, if I take it to Jupiter, the matter is always going to remain the same. And so the mass always stays the same. When I take it to a different planet, though, the amount of gravity pulling on it causes its weight to change. So when we talk about mass, it's the amount of matter that makes up something, and matter is anything that takes up, space and has some mass to it. All of this leads to a specific type of matter, and that is a key word that can be mixed up at times, and that is the word substance. Pay careful attention to the definition of substance. It's a single kind of matter that is pure, meaning it always has a specific makeup or composition. Some examples of a substance the book gives you is salt. Salt is always going to be made up of NaCl, or sodium chloride. Those properties are always the same for salt. When we talk about water, water is pure, it is H2O. Doesn't matter, like it says, if it comes from in an ice form, if it's water form, it is always H2O. Some other substances, a diamond is a pure substance. Baking soda, sodium chloride. We'll get into more of that. Any of the elements on a periodical table is a substance. They are pure. Tin, gold, those are pure substances. There's nothing else mixed in with them. Water is just H2O. There is nothing else with it. And that is what a substance is. Now, so if I was going to take a look, we say matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. Substance is a single kind of matter. And we'll put down examples: water and salt. You could also put down a diamond or anything on the periodic table. Okay. If we move on to page 90, we are now going to look at how we are going to describe or put these properties about matter into categories. Um, if you look, here's the key um, answer to the question that we had on the very first um, uh, page, and that is every form of matter has two kinds of properties: its physical properties and its chemical properties. All right, if you think of the word physical, um, this is things more that like you can see, touch. It is the properties that are going to be uh, visible without changing uh, the substance. Uh, where a chemical property is going to describe more of when a substance can change, the ability for it to change. When we get into section 4, we're going to talk about physical changes and chemical changes. A chemical change is when something changes into something totally different. And so when we look at chemical properties, these are the characteristics or the abilities of these things to be able to change into different. And we're going to look at some of these. Physical properties are a lot easier to see and observe. Yeah, if you look down here, some physical properties such as luster. Luster just means if it shines. The ability to conduct electricity or heat, that's a physical property. You can see that, you can feel it. Flexibility, being able to bend, is a physical property. More physical properties that are mentioned, um, whether a substance has a freezing point or a melting point or a boiling point. Those are all, those don't change. Water, we know, always freezes at 0 degrees Celsius and it boils at 100 degrees Celsius. Those are um, physical properties that we know happen. And different substances have different temperatures, but we can look at them as if something freezes or melts, that is a physical property. Now we'll come back to this one here in a second. Let's go to the next page. And on page 91, some more physical changes would be, or physical properties would be, the hardness. Is it soft? Is it hard? Texture. Texture means, is it rough? Is it smooth? Temperature. Color. And when you look at these two objects here, a physical property would be that this is red, this is green, it's cold, it's smooth or rough, it's not very hard. Those are all physical properties. You're describing what they are. And the last thing we'll talk about physical is the state of matter. Is it a solid, a liquid, or a gas? Those are all things that describe a physical property. Now, if we go back to page 90, some chemical properties, such things like when something rusts. Well, you can see that when iron combines with oxygen, it forms rust. That's a chemical property. They're reacting. You can have silver that tarnishes. These are all things, again, showing change. Gold, it doesn't really act very very well with that, with oxygen or sulfur. Again, if we go to page 91, if it's able to burn, that's a big thing. That's a chemical property. It's basically a way of changing one thing into another. And we're going to talk a lot about this in section 4, but how do we know that these or these chemical properties are there, or how can we see these chemical changes? Well, one of the things, there are ways to see that these things are changing chemically. If you see any type of light or heat being given off, that's a chemical change. That's a chemical property. You can see this light here and this heat given off by the flame. That would be considered a property or a chemical change. So it would have chemical properties. Um, if it forms a precipitate is a solid. So in the midst of a liquid, if a solid forms, that's an example of when a chemical change is happening. If there's a color change, not just by putting a dye in it, but if something changes in its color, such as if you put bleach on blue jeans, now those blue jeans have changed to like this white color, that would be a chemical change. And then if you ever see bubbling or fizzing, that's giving off a gas. Whenever you see something bubbling, that's gas trying to get out of the liquid, and it's giving off that gas. And so that would be an example of a chemical change happening, and would be a chemical property. It would be a example of a chemical property in the chemical change process.